Okay, we've been reading American Miscellany, which is published in 1865, so, I guess I have to, I'm always making allowances for the racism in this thing. And our last essay number 63 on the Hindu scholar was, wow, that was a doozy. I mean, they just hit that racism hardcore. I don't think the next essay is going to make up for it. It's called Lycurgus, and I don't know. I think we're in for a lot of old white man stuff here, but let's go ahead and get into it. This is essay number 64. We're here on page 144, and we're reading American Miscellany. All right, essay number 64, Lycurgus. No man ever more truly deserved the title of reformer than did Lycurgus, the Spartan lawgiver. And there have lived few men whose lives and actions were of a more interesting character. Lycurgus flourished about 900 years before the Christian era, or about 2,700 years ago. As may be supposed, the incidents of his life are neither so numerous nor so well authenticated as would be desirable. But if there be doubts in regard to his personal history, then can be none in regard to the reforms he brought about and the institutions he established. Lycurgus is commonly believed to have been a son of Eunomus of the royal house of Lacedaemon, or Lacedaemon, sorry. Don't know my pronunciation there, Lacedaemon, but not in the line of direct succession. The death of his brother appeared to give him a title to the crown, but his widow giving promise of an heir to the throne, Lycurgus assumed the government as regent. The brother's widow, preferring the queenly dignity to that of queen mother, proposed to destroy the yet unborn. The brother's widow, preferring the queenly dignity to that of queen mother, proposed to destroy the yet unborn heir to the throne of Sparta and share the crown with Lycurgus. Stifling his indignation at such an infamous proposal, he yielded a seeming absent. Stifling his indignation at such an infamous proposal, he yielded a seeming assent. But as procuring an abortion, although sometimes practiced, was attended with serious danger to the health of the mother, Lycurgus persuaded her to do no violence to the course of nature, since, if born, the infant might be easily disposed of. At the time for the birth of the child drew nigh, Lycurgus placed trusty attendants around the person of the queen, with orders to bring him the child, if it proved a son, as soon as born. This happened while he was sitting at table with the magistrates of Sparta. The newborn prince was brought to him, and taking the infant in his arms, he immediately named it Charilaus, and proclaimed him king of Sparta. After which, as regent, he provided for his proper care and education. There was thus thrown upon this noble prince two great cares, the government of the realm as regent and the protection of the lawful sovereign. With these cares come also a danger, from which the sensitive soul of Lycurgus shrunk with dread. The life of this infant alone stood between him and the supreme power. If the child should die, he would doubtless be accused of its murder from motives of ambition. Lycurgus resolved to avoid this danger and do his country a great service at the same time. During the minority of the king, leaving the administration of the state in the hands of proper officers, he became a voluntary exile, traveling in various parts of Greece, in Egypt, and, if we believe the historians, in India. For Egypt and India were, in the early ages of Greece, considered as the fountains of science and wisdom. During this exile and these travels, Lycurgus perfected a plan for the reformation of the institutions of his country, which, when Charillus, his ward, had arrived at maturity, he returned to put in practice. And reforms were greatly needed. Sparta had fallen into a deplorable situation. The soil had become gradually monopolized by the rich landlords who lived in luxury, while the great mass of the people, being without land, were poor, oppressed, and degraded. Wow, this sounds familiar, doesn't it? And were often in danger of starvation when their SNAP benefits were taken away. And were often in danger of starvation. Such an unnatural state of things enervated the rich, crushed down and dispirited the poor, provoked discontent, outrages, and rebellion, surprise, surprise, which produced despotism and tyranny, and threatened the entire ruin of the country. Okay, look, see this little paragraph written down in 1865 telling us of the terrible things that happen when the rich get super rich and the poor are starving. They're telling us about this history that was 2,800 years ago at this point. And we didn't learn then. And we didn't learn in 1865. And we didn't learn in 2025. And here we are. All right. We've got that paragraph. Let's memorize it. It was bad. Okay. Writers have uniformly expressed astonishment that Lycurgus should have had sufficient power and influence to correct these great abuses in the state. Actually, maybe we'll come up with some solutions here in the next page or two. This is awesome. But when it is considered that he was the uncle of the king and that he had governed the country as regent, that he was entitled to the gratitude of the sovereign and the people on account of the conduct we have narrated, and that by his foreign travels and study he had acquired the respect due to superior wisdom, and when to these considerations we add the fact that, in common with all the reformers and legislators of past ages, he invoked the authority of religion, we shall not be astonished at the result of his efforts in remodeling the institutions of his country. We must consider also that the free citizens of Lacedaemon did not number more than 200,000 or 300,000. Yeah, that helps. Returning from the feet of the Brahmins and the temples of Egypt, Lycurgus set himself steadily at the great work of reform. First, he visited the Delphic oracle, and the Spartans heard with veneration a sentence they were already well disposed to believe, that Lycurgus in wisdom transcended the common level of humanity. He then secured a considerable party. So they're talking about transcendence before transcendentalism. That's kind of cool. Lycurgus in wisdom transcended the common level of humanity. He then secured a considerable party of the best citizens of Sparta, and though he met with an opposition so violent as at times to threaten his life, his firmness and courage at length triumphed over every obstacle, and he established laws and institutions for Sparta which remained for many centuries, and which gave her great renown in all succeeding times. The first object was to reform the great and fundamental evil, the monopoly of wealth by a few. There we go. First, the great and fundamental evil, the monopoly of wealth by a few, which necessarily reduced the great body of the people to extreme poverty. At a single blow, aided by the king, a senate which he had established, consisting of the most popular men in the state, and the voice of the people, Lycurgus destroyed the existing titles to large tracts of land vested in a few individuals, and the soil of Lacedaemon as the property of the state was divided among the people, and their rights in the soil were guarded by such provisions that no family could be deprived of the means of support. We are not particularly informed of the difficulties which attended this reform, but it made the way easy for every other. In the government, the office of king was retained. It was one of dignity and respect, but that was paid to the office rather than the man. The monarch assumed none of the trappings of state or royalty. He dressed like the common people and dined with them at the common public table. A commander-in-chief of the army, he exercised the greatest authority. Oh, so who was commander-in-chief? Okay. 30 senators were chosen by a free election, which was curiously managed. Several judges were placed in a room where they could hear but not see the whole assembly of the people. The candidates then presented themselves successively before the people, and he who got the greatest applause the judges declared to be elected. The grand reform of a fair division of soil among the people having been carried out, the artificial distinction of wealth was at once abolished, and poverty was unknown. The whole country looked, as Lycurgus himself observed, like a heritage newly shared among many brethren. The removal of poverty and riches in real estate was made the more complete by banishing useless arts and luxuries, and even money. For Lycurgus established a currency of iron, while it served in so small a state the common purpose of a circulating medium or measure of exchange, presented no temptation to hoard or accumulate. Maybe that's what we tried to do. Presented no temptation to hoard or accumulate. Let us look now at the customs and institutions which this extraordinary man founded. The Spartan institutions were pervaded by one principle: the citizen is born, lives, and is ready to die for the state. His substance, time, strength, faculties, and affections are dedicated to its service. Its welfare is his happiness, its glory his honor. Patriotism was the Spartan's leading virtue. When a child was born, he was not allowed to live if so weakly or deformed as not likely to be capable of performing all the duties of a citizen and transmitting to the full vigor of manhood to his posterity. And as much pains were taken to ensure a good breed of men as are now employed in improving the races of inferior animals. The infant, until the age of 7, was left to the care of its parents under certain established rules of treatment calculated to protect them from the mischievous indulgence of parental tenderness. At 7, they were sent to the public schools, which were under the superintendence of the elders, who were assisted by the picked young men of the nation. The education of the boys consisted of various gymnastic and military exercise. They were also taught music and dancing. The songs of the Spartans contained the greater part of their literature, their history, and perhaps their religion. Their exercises were conducted with all the rigor of military discipline, and were such as to give them strength, energy, and the greatest powers of endurance. They were taught habitually to despise danger, to exercise caution, to endure fatigue, and to brave torture and death with unflinching fortitude. There has never been seen a finer race of men, gifted with more vigor, grace, and agility than the Spartans, and they were consequently invincible as soldiers. From the time the young Spartan left the lap of his mother for the public schools, his life was a continued exercise for the development of Spartan qualities. He lived on coarse and scanty fare, and this was often withheld. He wore a thin dress in the depth of winter, slept on a bed of reeds gathered by himself from the Eurotas, fought with his comrades, received stripes from his governors, as an exercise rather than a punishment, foraged for himself, in spite of the vigilance used to prevent or detect him, and was known to die rather than discover his plunder, or submit to a public flogging at the shrine of Diana. The cultivation of music, poetry, and a sharp and ready wit, with extreme modesty, obedience, and a reverence for age, were the intellectual and moral characteristics of this nation. All the Spartans died at public tables, to which each man sent his contribution of provisions. Men were admitted to these daily public feasts by ballot, requiring unanimous consent, and no one elected, not even the king, could dine at home without incurring a fine. These feasts were enlivened by pleasantry and mirth, but never profaned by impure conversation. At the age of 60, the military life closed, and the aged men either employed themselves in superintending the affairs of education or passing their time pleasantly in social conversation. Victory or death was the Spartan's watchword. The Spartan mother sent her son to battle with the injunction to bring his shield home or be borne home upon it. No matter what the odds of numbers, the Spartan never turned his back to an enemy. He who did so was publicly disgraced, excluded from all society, and forced to wear in public a ridiculous costume, and be a mark for scorn and insult, a disgrace worse than death. Sparta was at all times like a camp. All her men were soldiers. War was the element in which the Spartan breathed most freely and enjoyed the fullest consciousness of his existence. He dressed for battle as for a feast, but went into action singing martial songs, and with every appearance of gay enthusiasm, as if joining in a public festival. The Spartan women were held in a peculiar esteem, and enjoyed a degree of freedom and social consideration contrasting strongly with the general condition of the sex in the Eastern world. Their education was intended to promote the highest physical development and to fit them to be mothers to heroes. The Spartan women were celebrated for chastity, and their matrons appeared seldom in public, but yet exercised a strong influence in all public affairs. The Spartans were very religious, and the luxuries they denied themselves they lavished on the temples of the gods and displayed in the processions in their honor. For in no part of Greece were religious ceremonies more splendid or temples more magnificent. Such were the institutions and manners formed by Lycurgus. When he had seen them in fair and successful operation in his old age, he told his assembled countrymen that there was yet one thing upon which he wished to consult the sacred and infallible oracle at Delphos, and he made them take a solemn oath to keep his laws until he returned to Sparta. Arrived at Delphos, he sent back word that the oracle had said that Sparta should be prosperous as long as her people observed his laws. Then, that the oath taken at his departure might bind them forever, he determined never to return. Lycurgus died in exile, when and where is not known, though it is said that he ended his life by voluntary starvation. So maybe he did learn something from the yogis in India or something. That was a good one, actually. Good old white man, Lycurgus.